Hey everybody, it's Kelly. Welcome back to another episode of Ask a Therapist. This week we were dealing with emotional intimacy in queer relationships. A number of videos ago, I talked a little bit about the fact that in queer relationships, especially when you've been deeply closeted for a while, you tend to be emotionally intimate very quickly, and often it's a false sense of intimacy. And so I've gotten a couple of questions about that, and I want to answer those questions for you. So that's what we're going to talk about, but first I need to ask you to subscribe, to comment, to like, and ring the bell so that you can get notified anytime I post. In this one particular video, I was talking about how false emotional intimacy can hurt the future of a relationship if it's going to be long term. And I recognize that statement may have come off a little bit flip, but what I was saying is that especially when you don't have a lot of queer people in your support system at home, physical and emotional intimacy in queer relationships looks different. It looks different for every relationship. Actually, it looks different for every relationship, period. But specifically in queer relationships, it looks different than it does in cis-het relationships. And there's a couple of different reasons for that. First of all, let's talk statistics, shall we? There are some stats out there about orgasm rates and sexual satisfaction that exists in queer or specifically in same-sex relationships than exists in cis-het relationships. And I'll put these here for you. I'm just going to let you draw your own conclusions on them because those numbers they're something. While there have been studies that have talked about the reason for that drastic difference, I don't know that there's any one reason why any of those exist, because you're really taking the one person as the control in any of those situations, and the way that they respond to any of those situations has to factor in. There's so many factors to those stats that it's very difficult for us to say this is an across-the-board statement. Obviously, this is better. That's not a thing, and that's not what I would be doing this video anyway. That information is out there in public, and so is in the back of people's minds when they get into relationships also. The physical intimacy aspect can take two different, pretty significant extremes in a relationship. I don't ever want to degrade a sexual relationship, a physically intimate relationship, to parts, because that's not what it's about. And because of that, part of what you want to see in this video is not going to exist because I'm not that person. What I do want to talk about is the level of trust that exists in relationships where someone understands where you might be coming from. On the emotional intimacy front, this is where things start to get really complicated. Often people go one of two ways when they first get into a relationship, and that is either they'll go the one way of very close, very fast emotional intimacy and trust with that other person, or they go completely the opposite direction where they run from the emotional intimacy with that other person because it feels so different from what they're used to, and that emotional intimacy is not something that they want at that current time. When it comes to emotional intimacy, this factors into everyone, no matter who it is that you are attracted to, no matter who it is that you are as a human. The emotional intimacy portion of that relationship is going to make or break that relationship. Sometimes, if you rush really quickly into it, that's where the stereotype of the two women in a relationship and the U-Haul. I'll hear people talk about the typical first lesbian date, and that's where it lasts hours and hours and hours into the evening. You have dinner, you have drinks, you have a walk, you maybe spend the entire day together, and that emotional connection that you have developed feels deeper and more real and more significant than maybe any other emotional connection is felt in other relationships that you've had. That's for a couple of different reasons. It is believed that one of the reasons that same-sex couples become emotionally intimate so quickly is because there are less of them out there. And so when you find one, you are more inclined to hold on quickly. There's that. Not only is living as queer inherently lonely sometimes, it also means that you have to be hyper aware of all of the things around you all of the time. So from a good place or a bad place, people who grow up either closeted or quiet about their orientation do tend to be better people readers. And when you're a better person reader, you are more able to answer the emotional needs and demands of your partner. That's kind of a big deal. There's also an inherent open-mindedness that needs to happen for someone to grow up queer. You have to be more accepting of things, and the idea that hard and fast rules don't really exist in the world the way we assume that they do. So when you look at a same-sex relationship, often the expectations of gender roles aren't there, because if you've got two people of the same gender, then you are not able to divide things along the lines of gender roles unless some of the work just doesn't get done. So it tends to be more about the person's strengths, interests, or I know in my house, I will do the stuff that my wife hates to do, and then she'll do the stuff that I hate to do. It's not necessarily about like, I'm good at that or she's better at that, but it's just, I don't want to do it. And so she'll do it because I'm going to do something else that she hates to do. Right? That balance and understanding that comes up in a relationship is inherently built in a little bit more into same-sex relationships. So that's all the good stuff.
Yay, love it. So fantastic.
Here's where it becomes negative. Often, same-sex relationships, queer relationships as a whole, tend to be disproportionately long distance. Often that is true, especially in your first relationship in the queer community. It's an easing in of spending your time, of focusing your attention, of understanding yourself in the way that you have not understood yourself previously in any previous relationship. People joke all the time, especially on TikTok, about how this phenomenon works, that you can't have somebody that is emotionally available, mentally stable, you're equal in every way, and also lives locally. It's not entirely incorrect. But the deeper thing to this is that when someone does not live locally, it is easier for you to give that energy into the relationship that you wouldn't give you're seeing each other locally regularly. So while long distance is super difficult, it can make or break a relationship for sure. It does end up fostering that deeper connection that you wouldn't necessarily foster if the person was close by. However, that deeper connection is often founded on false things. So if you're in a long distance relationship and all of your in-person communication is either at your place or their place, at their place or at your place, you've got your best behavior on. You've cleaned the house before they've shown up. You maybe take off from work. You're on your best behavior during those times together. And so when you come off of that time together, it's like,
oh, this was amazing. This was so great. And
it was a fairy tale, because that's not real life. Now, that does not mean that hurts the relationship necessarily. You just need to be realistic about the emotional connection you feel that you have with someone, because as close as you feel with someone and as emotionally in sync as you feel with someone, if you have not put in any kind of long-term time, there are things you're missing. Even arguments are handled differently when you are far away from each other. You're more prone to spend time talking it out. You're more prone to tuning in to the other person and what it is they have going on when you're together and when you're apart, because that time is scheduled together. It's not the everybody goes to work, comes home, makes dinner, gets the house ready for the next day and goes to bed. During those times, during those everyday life together moments, the intentionality of spending the time together is different than the intentionality of spending time with someone who is long distance. So that we have a little bit of understanding. I will never be the person that says long distance doesn't work, or that you have to be together for a certain amount of time before you can really commit to each other. Everyone's relationship is different. I just see a whole lot of this almost fantasy world happen with the emotional intimacy that people get in long distance relationships. So that is part of it. The other part of it goes back to that loneliness thing. It goes back to that isolation part of it. When you find someone who has had experiences like yours, being seen for maybe the first time by someone, especially if it's someone that you can see yourself with longer term, man, that is a heady thing. That's going to change your life. We live in a world that says if you have a close relationship with someone, then it needs to go to the next level. And so because of that, often things will go to the next level before they're actually ready to. You can enjoy that close emotional relationship with someone without uprooting your whole life and moving to them if you're not sure you're ready yet. If you don't take that time to get to know each other, you're uprooting your life, you're moving with them, and you're saying, oh,
I didn't realize it was going to be like that.
I didn't realize that when they come home from work, they are actually kind of angry 90% of the time.
I didn't realize that I was going to have such a hard time finding a job, and so I'm in something that isn't what I wanted.
feeling emotionally connected to your partner is, well, that's what we want, right? If you want a long-term successful relationship, then you want that connection emotionally, intimately. Mistaking the emotional, intimate connection with longer-term understanding of one another is what leads to the relationship not working out. For people who do not take that time to really have your first couple of fights or have your first conversation about what do we do on the holidays, have the interaction of whether you're a beach person or a mountain person. When you don't know those things about each other until it comes up, that's more of a natural progression than when you're spending hours on the phone together or hours on FaceTime together because you're long distance or because your relationship is secretive. You ask all those questions because you want to keep the conversation going. But then you know all this information about them without having to more organically figure it out. So you feel closer to this person than you feel to people you've known for years. So what do we do with this information? First of all, just be aware of it. When you're in a deeply intimate relationship with someone, sexually, physically, emotionally, whatever, when you're in that relationship with someone, there needs to be some time to come up for air. Sometimes there needs to be some real weighing out of options before you make longer term decisions for commitment. There just needs to be some balance. It's important to stay you. It's important to have your own life too, to have your own interests separate from one another. It's important to be true to who you are so that this relationship is an asset to you and to your life and to them and to their life rather than being all of your life and all of who you are. That is just the healthier way to do it. I don't know how much this has applied to you in your life. I just see it so often played out that it feels like it was important to have this conversation. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Come back next week for more queer religious trauma and general therapy conversation. Thank you so much. I will see you next time. Until then, take care of yourselves and each other.